All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. It's great to see everybody zooming in and here in person. Thanks for being here. Yeah, it's just it's a real honor to have Mark here with us. I know many of you know Mark already. He's given some talks at our center, and he's got a couple of books out now. Mindful Thoughts for Stargazers and The Mindful Universe. And then this is his new book that he's going to talk a little bit about today, Zen and the Art of Dealing with Difficult People. And so Mark's a Zen teacher out in the UK with Zen Ways. He's been training and practicing with Daizan for about 15 years now. He also he has a PhD in astrophysics, and yeah, so just really really great to have him here to share a little. So, Mark, I was wondering, maybe to start, would you be able to just maybe give us a little bit of background about the new book and how you came up with this idea or this topic and settled on this, and just a little bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, so maybe some of you know, or some of you don't know, maybe the last couple of years I was living, my wife and I, we were living on this little tiny island down in the South Atlantic called St. Helena. And we came back for Christmas, not last Christmas, but the one before the pandemic, you know. So we came back visiting family and things. And just after New Year, I remember I was sitting in Daizan's flat just around the corner here, and we were just sort of chewing over a few things and talking about a few bits and pieces. And I remember him mentioning this sort of idea of maybe doing something around Zen and relationships, and particularly romantic relationships. You know, maybe maybe we could come up with some talks or maybe some workshop, and then we thought maybe a book. You know, there's probably enough stuff out there. And he was saying to me, "Oh, Mark, you're married. You know, you need to get involved in this. I don't know anything about marriage," says Daizen. So maybe we could try doing something together. Or so you know, we were just talking about ideas and bits and pieces. I remember perhaps agreeing on the idea of exploring a book maybe that we would write together. So then after that meeting, you know, I went back to St. Helena, miles and miles away, and I started to jot down a few ideas around how we could maybe have a book, or maybe some things we could talk about. And then those first few months, I think it was maybe 2019, the first few months of the year, Daizen was, you know, busy with stuff, and we were so far away. I just started to write some things down, and you know, Zen and romantic relationships, Zen and relationships. And then it developed, you know, into this idea of maybe thinking about just relationships in general. And we have this concept, you know, troublesome Buddhas as a term or phrase that certainly Daizen has used many, many times. The phrase being, Buddhas appear troublesomely, ancestors teach in detail. And it's kind of like an excerpt, I suppose, of a translation into English of a particular Zen text. Little phrase comes from that. And the idea of Buddhas appearing troublesomely took root, I suppose, in my ideas. And it kind of like just developed, you know, I started writing down a few chapter ideas and headings, and it just kind of like took on a life of its own, and just sort of blew up into this whole book thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I really, I've read a good chunk of it, not the whole thing quite yet, but can you, the different arenas that you talk about where we can find these troublesome Buddhas, were those arenas that for you kind of had in mind in your own life, or was it from talking to other people students or people at Zen Ways, how did those arenas become what they are in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I probably definitely feel like I'm in no sense the expert on all of this, on dealing with difficult people. And it became quite obvious very early on that I just really could not write this book by myself. And that's really why I was hoping that Daisen and I might write it together. But, Daisen was busy with his things. And so it became then quite clear that I could reach out to our community, to our Sangha, and see if there's anyone who could, bring some other wisdom. Because I've got my life and my particular difficult people and my perspective, but I mean, yeah, I've only encountered difficult people in certain areas, right? And as I started to speak to other people, it became clear that there's a whole range of places and ways and types, I suppose, of difficult people out there. So I reached out to our community, to our Sangha, and I was really surprised with the number of people that responded with, yeah, okay, I've got some troublesome people that I've dealt with over the years and learned from. And people contributed some absolutely spectacular and very, very inspirational examples. It's almost like this book, part of this book is very much a tribute to the depth of practice of our Sangha, and the people in our group, and that there's one or two people in the UK, there's one or two people in Europe, and also one or two people in the US who've contributed examples. It's really, really, really lovely to hear. Very, very moving, some of the stories in this book, some of the examples of people really sort of encountering some really quite thorny situations and people and finding such great wisdom in all of that. Yes, I suppose from speaking to all those different people, then they sort of slotted down into a number of different categories. So I suppose my intention in the book was to sort of, at least with the example section, at least to start off with what I call like common or garden troublesome people. Like, so we start off with like people commuters and people you travel with, people on the road, and then we think about neighbors and housemates and people we live with, and then we sort of sliding up the scale of difficulty, I suppose, or emotional heat, if you like, and we come up into workmates, and then onto family, siblings and children, and then parents. That's a big one. And then we're sort of onto what I call like troublesome ogres. So the people that really, really have caused a great deal of pain, perhaps been abusive at some level in your life. So kind of sliding up the scale.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I've really felt very refreshing is just how open you are about some of the stuff like in your childhood that came up that was painful and difficult people there. And just how you continue to kind of return to those experiences, and it kind of gives you, or I know for me, it really like your willingness to kind of be vulnerable with that stuff and kind of put it out there and be honest. I think it really gives the reader permission to kind of do this, kind of turn towards their stuff a little bit more, at least in my experience with reading the book.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah. I've just really appreciated that, and I'm sure other people who are reading it as well. And with considering to include that, I mean, was that kind of a natural unfoldment for you, or was that like going into the book where you like, well, I really want to tell my story here too, or how did that kind of play out, like your own stuff, especially early on?
I don't think I set out with the sense of I want to tell my story. In the previous books, I'd certainly the Mindful Universe book, I'd mentioned a little bit about my background and some of the things that had happened to me, but sort of like in passing, right, in small mentions. But when thinking about the topic of this book, it was sort of clear, I suppose, that well, I mean, I suppose I consider myself still very a young beginner, in this Zen practice, especially, when you look at someone like Daizan or yourself. So there was a big section in the introduction where I felt it was important to lay out, well, who am I to talk about this? I'm not a Roshi, I'm not, 80 years old, whatever. And I suppose part of what I felt qualified me, at least at some level, to talk about this stuff is I needed to put it out there. I needed to really be honest about some of the difficult, troublesome people that have been in my life. We've all got the common or garden troublesome people, the people that, I don't know, like cut you up on the road, or use your coffee mug at the work, and don't put it back, all that kind of difficult people. But it's like when it comes to talking about the really, really difficult people, well, yeah, I mean, I've had a couple, so it felt important to try to be as honest as I possibly could in the book. And as you say, I really hope that level of openness that I've tried to be in the book gives people a sense of this is it's okay, it's okay to entertain all of that stuff in your attention, in your awareness. And that I've heard from a couple of people have said to me just recently, in reading this book, it feels a little bit like, is it just me? Am I the only person that has all these difficult people in my life? But actually, in reading about lots of other people and lots of their examples, it's like, we all have difficult people. We all have difficult people at all sorts of different levels, and it's not just me. It's normal. It's human life. And so I hope that helps people to see that a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. I noticed just one of the threads that kind of, I forget if maybe it's kind of in the beginning of the book, but you really kind of weave some of the practice of psychotherapy into the book. And in particular, kind of like the attachment styles that a lot of us that people are working with, and that maybe really bed in early on in life. And I know that was really kind of interesting for me to kind of learn a little bit more about those, and also how you kind of weave the kind of your experience with psychotherapy into kind of alongside Zen practice and mindfulness. I thought that was unique.
Well, I hope it's not unique. I mean, I suppose it's like I felt it was important to say, at least, like, like Zen isn't the be all and end all, and actually there's a great deal in common, like overlap between the method, I found, between the approach, I suppose, of just sitting, and a more, maybe, I don't know, like sometimes, I mean, I suppose over the years I've viewed psychotherapy as a little bit more like an acute treatment. Like for me at that time, I needed someone to help me with this stuff. And maybe like in the years since then, I've seen people go on, these breakthrough to Zen retreats or some Zen sessions, or at least practicing, just consistently, regularly, day to day, and shift a load of stuff, really get through a lot of stuff in their life. But I suppose for me at that time, I'd only just started with Zen, and I didn't, Daizen wasn't running these 3-day breakthrough to Zen retreats, and I hadn't encountered other teachers who were doing anything similar. So I had found a therapist, and it just worked really well for me. The psychotherapist I was with was great, and I think there's something there that's important around when we've got really heavy stuff that's coming up or that needs to come up. Like, in no sense do we ever need to feel like we need to do this alone. And what my therapist helped with is creating that container and facilitating, I suppose, all that stuff to come up into a space where we could explore it without it feeling like it needed to be like that it was a bad thing, or it was just like creating a space. And there's a beautiful example in the book, actually, of a lady who had quite a angry, I suppose, and abusive marriage with a guy. And she herself found a lot of fire and anger rising, around this whole situation. And she describes how with Daizen, that situation within the Sanzen space, I suppose, like creating the space, two people, allowing all this anger to arise and be seen and kind of dissolve or be let go of in that sense. So, whether that happens in Sanzen or whether it happens with a therapist or whatever format that is, it is just a space, and a facilitation of that stuff to be lifted up and looked at, come into the light, if you like. Yeah. So for me, it worked very akin, close.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, in the book, I remember there were periods as I was writing that required me to really kind of like look deeply in myself and try to write it as honestly and as close to my reality as I could. And I felt it was important to try not to sort of gloss over it. It's tough to write about this stuff. It was hard going. And that was the bit, like I could write all the, there's always, when you write a book, there's easier bits and hard bits. And, when those bits where you just have to like delve within yourself and try to sort of write honestly. It took a lot of, I remember procrastinating for days and days and days. I do. I'm sure my wife Jo is very. I do all the hoovering. I go out and do all the gardening. And then I finish all the jobs. So I was like, well, what can I also do? And then it's like, okay, I've just got to sit down and get this stuff written.
Yeah. Well, I mean, did you say so? The book was written entirely when you all were in St. Helena on the island in the middle? Is that the Atlantic?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So I met with Daizan that new year, and then just pretty much that whole next year, like 2020. So last year, we were writing. So it was just the greatest place, like to be on this little island with. Jo would get up and go to work, and I'd be there in the house all day. I was teaching a bit of yoga and meditation, but it wasn't much. I'd just be there at home, and I'd be, eventually writing. It was great. Highly recommend. If anyone's got a book to write, go and find a tiny island and go and live there for a bit.
Yeah. 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 We were reading a little passage from the book last week, just of the introduction, I think. And just that image you use about like troublesome Buddhas or difficult, seemingly, difficult people for us, just how separate they feel and seem. And just the more we embrace them and really bring awareness to what's going on in us and in the situation, that image of the mountain peaks, from a distance, looking at the mountain peaks and how, there's the cloud layer maybe, and they look very separate, the different peaks. And, at some point when the clouds vanish or dissolve away, there's this, you see the wholeness, the entirety, the connectedness, the oneness of the mountain through the valleys, and how those seeming mountain peaks are just, they're one and the same, they're together. I think everybody, I know I really resonated with that, and seems like others here very much resonated with that imagery as well, that you use.
Yeah, I suppose one thing that people have said in previously is, gosh, these difficult people, the people that really like press my buttons and irritate me, why the hell would I want to learn from them? I want to be as far away from them as I possibly can, like I don't want to. And yeah, I mean, I get it. I totally understand. Just the other day, I was on the Amazon page for the book, just checking something out. And, like underneath the thing you're looking for on Amazon, it gives you a whole lot of suggestions of things that are similar, and I was, it brought up these other books about, how to rid your life of difficult people, how to overcome, those irritating people in your life, how to, all that kind of stuff. I think one was even like how to shoot an arrow through troublesome people, that kind of thing. And I thought, gosh, I felt quite sad, because the world is full of those kind of books, and like overcoming, I suppose, or getting rid of. And there's an instinct there of, well, I wish I could just find a way of living that was away from all these difficult people in my life. Let's get rid of them. But I mean, what I hope to get across in the book is that there's so much that we can learn. There's so much opportunity in every encounter we find difficult to learn about ourselves, and to learn about what it is to relate with other people, and what it is actually to come into this relationship with a difficult person, and find that relationship, explore that relationship. And so if we got rid of all these people in our life, they wouldn't be there. And I think that's kind of sad. So I really hope that we can all find a way of, like, as you say, like kind of softening that view around difficult people. And I think it all starts with simply that willingness, the willingness to entertain the possibility that you may not be right, and they may not be wholly wrong. So I think where we start often is like, well, I'm right and they're wrong. They're irritating me. They're the ones with the problem. And I think that we immediately get into this like fairly like rigid stance, when people start pushing our buttons. So if we can just entertain the possibility that there might be something here, that there might be something to learn, or some different perspective on this relationship, then that's where it all starts.
Yeah. Another thing we were talking a little bit about last week was just a little bit about Shinzan Roshi and just how his place in Japan was always just, and I know you mention it in the book as well, and Daizan has a little piece about his practice there with Shinzan Roshi, and I know about that too, of course, and just how he really went out of his way to make the temple into kind of like a fertile ground of troublesome Buddhas for you to for everybody to kind of rub up against and be tested and be made angry and scared, and it was like you would go to him and tell him, just this person is wrong for this reason, and this reason, and they need to leave. You need to please tell this person to leave or whatever. You go to him with all of these ideas about, your stuff, and not willing to kind of look at your stuff. And then he kind of listens to you and he's like, yes, they're there, and doesn't make any changes. And he's just, it's still just as wild and crazy as it always was. So I really appreciated that part about troublesome teachers that you mentioned, and Daizan's kind of his excerpt about just his time at Gyokuryuji as well.
Yeah, maybe there's a sort of like potential in a Zen temple for all things to be very, very comfortable and easy. I mean, I don't know how realistic that is. I mean, Daizan talks a lot about his first few years in the Zen temple here in the UK, where he started, and it being very much like the pressure cooker, people rubbing up against each other. But I suspect that a lot of people have the view that being in a temple would be very sort of harmonious and smooth and all that kind of stuff. And maybe we are very lucky to be part of this lineage where and Shinzan Roshi in particular being very adamant that he is not going to make a situation which is smooth and harmonious for very definite reasons. He knew that is such a fertile ground for growth. And I suppose being all of us living out in daily life, we don't have to look very far. In fact, we probably look around right now and see people that are troublesome Buddhas right now, and in no sense is life harmonious, maybe for short periods, but here we are, lessons for everyday life. That's it.
Yeah. I was curious if anybody over Zoom or in person. I know a handful of people. I know we just got the books last week, and just a handful of people have picked them up, or just listening to Mark's talk. Anything popping up for anybody to ask Mark, or anything you're curious about in terms of the book or practice or anything like that?
Oh, Shinkai, I've got one online here.
Oh, great. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Amanda, please. Yeah.
Hi, Mark. I do have a question. What if you start to suspect that you yourself are the troublesome Buddha?
Yes, very good question. Yeah. How do we know if we're being someone else's troublesome Buddha? Well, I'm absolutely sure that all of us have been someone else's troublesome Buddha at some point, and potentially, regularly, I think. I think it comes, in my mind at least, it comes down to what is our intention, and whether it's dealing with other people that are difficult, or potentially, like worrying that you yourself might be difficult. So it's like, what is our intention? How do we move through life? What's our like foundation, I suppose? And Daizan, you know, he's talked a lot about how he said to me, Mark, you know, marriage is like being in a 2-person monastery. So, you know, in some sense, so we live confined together, and well, we've chosen to live confined together, and you know, we bounce off each other and rub off each other all the time. And in my experience, I'm absolutely positive, I know that I've been Joe's troublesome Buddha, you know, and vice versa. So in my feeling is that the most important thing is our willingness to be aware, you know, of what you feel, how you feel, what is arising, how the relationship feels. So it's not just about what you feel on the inside, it's like how you feel is what's happening in the space in between. You know, you have you and the other person, and you have this relationship which exists in the space, in the energy, if you like, between the two people. So it's kind of like tuning in to what's going on there, and then doing your absolute best to be as open and honest as you can about expressing, you know. And I'm terrible at that. I know I've come a long way, and I know a long way to go, but it's just like that. When I've been in a situation, let's say with Joe, for example, where things, you know, I know I'm being difficult, and she's mentioned a couple of things, whatever it is, it's like, how can I stay true to what I'm feeling, to be really tuned in, and then doing my best to try to express that in a way that's not, you made me feel like this. I'm feeling like this. I don't know why. This is what's sort of rising right now. You know, that seems to be an important, I suppose, way of expressing, you know. And we go on these 3-day retreats, the Breakthrough to Zen retreats, and it's like there's such amazing training in that we spend hour after hour doing our best to try to express from a point of view of I feel this is arising in me, I've got a twinge in my left shoulder, or whatever it is, and we're just expressing that. And I think it seems to me like a great training, you know, in these kind of situations, just allowing that expression of my present moment experience without any judgment, without any sense of like blame or saying you caused me like this. So if we, in my mind, if we can stay close to that, then we may very well be in someone else's troublesome Buddha, but our intentions are to be as, you know, open and kind and present and honest as we can. Then whatever happens after that.
Yeah, nice. Anybody else? Anything coming up? Oh yeah, Renee.
Hi, Mark. In the book, do you talk about public figures? I'm thinking about how steamy under the collar I get when I watch the news sometimes. And I wonder if is it better to just shut off the news, or is there some work to be done there?
Yeah, great question. I really wanted to include a section in the book on troublesome politicians.
That's
it. Yeah. When I was looking around, you know, when I was talking to some people about how do you deal with difficult politicians or politics, the overwhelming response from people that I spoke to, at least, was, well, I've just decided to turn it off. So I thought, well, that's all well and good. It doesn't really make a whole chapter. So I didn't really find enough material, I suppose, to put in. I didn't really know quite what to say other than to just turn it off. But I think you're absolutely right. I think for many of us, you know, we've got the people we encounter, I suppose, in daily life. But then there's this big section, like there's just kind of under the surface, maybe, of being very frustrated with the powers that be, you know, the politics and politicians and things and decisions they make. Yeah, I mean, it also feels quite removed. You know, it's very difficult to know what to do about it because they're out there. You know, you're not really sort of able to talk to them at all. You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Shinkai, do you have a sense, or maybe other people have got a, you know, I'd be interested to know what people do, you know, when they've got difficult politicians. Have people just you know, found that turning it off is the only way, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you've been saying, at least what's coming up for me now, is as long as there's kind of like that purposeful, conscious awareness there, it's like you can use the headlines and watching the news reports as a practice. Heading right into it, like, okay, I know this is going to push a lot of my buttons. I'm going to feel a lot of stuff, and I'm going to just do my very best to, like you say, just be there right in the middle of it and feel it. And it's an excellent, through putting yourself in that situation of just listening to what they're saying and the stuff that arises in you. It's an excellent, I mean, sometimes that stuff comes up naturally in meditation, of course, but it's like putting yourself in the situations, like you're saying, especially with that intention to use it as practice. I think that could be a way of working with it. Yeah.
I mean, and also like when we entertain the possibility that there may be more than my own perspective in this, I think that's one of the key first steps, I suppose. Like, you know, I'm right and you're wrong, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's a different view here. You know, when we consider these politicians or politics or news articles and things, it's like, well, looking beyond the surface, it's like, well, there's a different perspective here. There's a different person. They might have a different view. Why do they have a different view? Where are they coming from? You know, or just being open to a different view. And then also understanding that a lot of news is kind of written in order to push your buttons, you know, and they're trying to find buttons in people because buttons enrage people, or, you know, and it's like, okay, I see that, you know, I'm open to looking for that. I know that they're trying to push my buttons, and just kind of being aware of how your buttons are pushed. Yeah. It's a very, very fruitful area. Thanks for bringing that up.
So can I ask a question? I would like to ask, when you're talking about politicians in our last round of president, not the current one, I felt periods of trying to be peaceful and periods where I felt guilty for disliking him so much. And it was powerful at times, you know, there was just so much wrong going on. And I thought, what could I do about it? You know, that would help. And it seemed hopeless at times. And so that's where I would leave the situation of what I was listening to, but didn't stop me from trying to search for something that might be more workable during those conversations I was listening to. And sometimes it was really helpful, you know, it would bring me to a place where I thought, oh, there's still hope. There's still some people that are trying to make things work. But then when I saw the wrong stuff going on, that's where it throws you back into feeling hopeless or feeling guilty for having bad feelings about this, because I don't think I will ever have a personal relationship with that person in any way. But I'm a person that lives in this country, and we're all sort of in the same soup, you know? So it's really challenging to try to find a way to cope, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I really wanted to, there's a whole section, a whole chapter in the book about bringing a sense of compassion, because when we start looking at this kind of stuff, particularly at the we start to become aware of our particular habit patterns around difficult people, difficult situations. We talk a little bit about the sort of traditional Buddhist view of the habit patterns, the forces of want, which would equate a little bit to kind of the forces of anger. Like I always get very angry at people, and I always try to, I always fight back. And then the forces of aversion, which would be the kind of, I always try to avoid, or I try to deny, or I try to, sort of placate people. And then there's also the forces of delusion, like I get, confused and I don't really know what's going on. So we start to encounter or become aware of our particular habit patterns, due to all sorts of different reasons in the past why we have ended up moving one way or the other. And it's like, God, look at me, oh, what a mess I'm in. And I should never do this. And I always do that. And, it's like, it becomes this huge thing about, you can easily end up down the road of judging yourself so badly. And that's where we need so much kindness and compassion. And it really, really helps to kind of be active, if you like, about that compassion side of things, because towards ourselves when we get angry and when we maybe say the wrong things or do things that are not helpful, or as you say, like in this kind of situation where we just find total despair or just not knowing what to do. And then also compassion, well, as much as we can towards those different views and those people we find difficult. And actually the compassion is part of this kind of like movement towards a softening, movement towards trying to become aware of another view, a different perspective. And I know for myself, like, I've had a long and difficult relationship with my father. And I think for periods of that relationship, especially in the last 10 years, I've found that it was necessary to cut communication altogether. I was found it basically to sever the relationship, so that I found that then anything new, like if I met up with him or if I spoke with him, it would just confuse and add, and it would, like the waters would get all choppy and difficult. When I was trying to deal with stuff, there was enough stuff there already. So actually to cut communication and to cut the relationship allowed the waters in me to calm down a bit, so I could just process what was coming up without adding anything more. And then after a while, I felt like I'd dealt with sufficient stuff that I could reopen the relationship again and talk to him again. And so, in no sense do we need to feel like we need to sort of soldier on in that way. Like it seemed to me totally plausible and kind in a way to actually say, no, I'm gonna stop this. I need this out of my life completely just for this period while I process what's going on, and then maybe return to it later.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could do one more question. You have a little bit more time, Mark. Is that okay?
Sure, of course, yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Last question.
Okay, yeah, Scott in the back here. Okay.
First, learn to focus using the upper layer of the brain to answer questions. And somebody else is using their limbic system. Are there answers available through that process?
Okay, so if someone, could you hear that, Mark?
You might have to repeat that one, yeah.
If someone is using the upper layers of the brain to interact with somebody who's using more of the limbic system, what was the last part, Scott?
Does that help provide answers to the problem?
Does that help provide answers to the problem?
So I assume you mean the upper area being our kind of like intellectual cognitive thoughts, our limbic system being our more emotional side of things. It's interesting. I just finished reading this book by a neuroscientist, and she kind of like very much blows all that out of the water and talks about how, you know, the different parts of the brain are not actually as distinct and clear as perhaps we once thought. But I mean, anyway, I really like this analogy. It resonates very much with me, considering my background in science. There's this analogy, what people call the master and the emissary. So this story. So that the emissary is a person who sort of makes the journey from the town up, you know, every day, walks upward to the temple, meets the master, and sort of has a talk about the current situation and what needs to be done. And the master says, oh no, next week we'll be planting the crops. This week we're focusing on, you know, organizing our town. And then the emissary would sort of receive that wisdom and walk down, go to town, and then sort of describe to the people what the master has taught and what he thinks needs to happen. So, you know, after a period of time, the emissary feels like he's done this so many times, so enough times, and received the wisdom that, you know, he feels like he could go it alone. So he stops going up to the temple and starts just talking to the people in every day, transmitting what he perceives as being the wisdom, you know, and after a period of time, the town descends into chaos. You know, nothing's being done properly, and things are all out of shape and things out of whack. So the sort of an analogy is that the emissary is in a sense our reasoned intellectual thought, and the master is our more like holistic, intuitive, whole picture kind of view of things. And what can happen, and what has people have said, you know, like culture these days is a little bit like we're in this situation where the emissary has stopped going to the master. And for me, like when I did all those years studying science and maths and things, you know, like that kind of reasoned intellectual way of dealing with things was held up as the pinnacle of our human, you know, faculties, if you like. And actually, I remember, you know, in science, almost like the intuitive gut feeling sense of things was seen as being a bad thing, and kind of like, you need to get rid of it. So, I mean, for myself, when I decided to shift out of astronomy, I saw that imbalance, and I really wanted to try to redress that balance. So I spent some years really focusing on relationships and meditating and tuning into my, you know, feeling side of things. So when the emissary feels like it's running the show, when our intellect feels like it's running the show, it's kind of out of place, really. You know, it's not the pinnacle, you know, of our human faculties. It is just one part. And so I suppose if we can find a way of being that we've got this kind of gut feeling, this intuitive, this whole view of things, and then if necessary, or when necessary, we can turn to our intellect and say, well, like for example, let's say for example, you know, we meet someone who's very, very difficult. We try to see the whole picture. We try to be in tune with our feelings, our emotions, and our response, physical response in the body. And then it might be a sense, okay, well, now I need to think a little bit. What's the best thing to do? And maybe, you know, we write down, even like on a piece of paper, all the difficult things, all the potential solutions, the things I could say, the things I could do. And then it's like, okay, all that information gets passed back in to our, you know, maybe you could think of it as setting it back down to the hara. And then the hara can kind of like percolate with it for a bit. And then out of that that place, out of the horror, there may be like an action that arises that feels appropriate to do, or something we need to say, or something like that. So it's like the intellect has its use, and it's certainly very useful in certain situations and for certain reasons, but it's certainly not the whole thing. You know, maybe our culture has this view that the emotional animal side of things needs to be sort of held back, but I don't feel, and I don't feel like Zen holds that view. You know, Zen is very much about trying to integrate and trying to you know, use our faculties as is appropriate. I feel like the koan practice, you know, is a very, very thoroughgoing training, I suppose, in how to put our faculties in the right place and use them as and when is needed at the right amount, without thinking about it. It just happens. So, I mean, maybe a little bit long-winded there, sorry, but hopefully that sort of addresses your point.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to come and to talk a little bit about the new book.
There's one person just put something in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right.
So please let us know when you start your podcast. So thank you so much for the reminder and the nudge, Diana. My intention is to start a podcast. My intention is to actually create a short series of podcasts, I suppose, to go along with the book. I feel like it lends itself very, very well to the podcast format. So I've made a start, and I hope to be launching it straight off in the new year with a few episodes. And we're going to be I'm just going to be talking to some people about their difficult people and sort of chewing over the fat, as it were. Yeah, so straight into the new year is the answer. Hopefully we'll come up with we'll make a start and see where it goes. Maybe it'll be a short series, or maybe it'll develop into something else.
That sounds great. That sounds great. And Mark, just as far as getting the word out here, how could we, like book reviews, stuff like that? How could we help with that?
Well, it seems like the whole book world revolves around reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. So I'd certainly very much appreciate, 1 star, 2 star, whatever stars you want to give it, and whatever kind of review comes up, it all helps. So yeah, just if you have a little moment, a little review somewhere, it'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've been interviewed already on a few podcasts. So if you just look around, if you're interested to hear more or get a different perspective,
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, we've got a whole stack of these books. We're
really sorry I can't reach out and put a little scribble on them.
Yeah. And yeah, they're typically $20, but up until the new year, we're selling them for $15. So have a word with Julie or somebody if you'd like. And okay, all right.
Someone said to me the other day, I can think of a passive aggressive way of dealing with my difficult people in life. I'm just going to buy you one of my books. but it's true. You got to be careful about who you give them to. But also the other side, we all doesn't matter where we're at, we all have difficult people. So I really hope that everyone can find something in this book. So even if you give it to your closest family members, it's not a sign to say that you're finding you difficult.
Yeah.